Hey, this is Pierre Delacote talking. I wanted to talk about a framework I use sometimes on my project because, you know, a lot of time people are having problems and they try to define solution and they jump into the solution and they don't really have a methodology to really define the right solution. So the first thing is, first to identify the problem. What is your problem? And sometimes the problem can be, my team is not productive. People are not leveraging the tools that they should use, or they don't use them correctly. So there's some assumptions about the problem, but the real problem is the first thing is to understand what are the consequences, of your problem. Try to understand that. Then you switch to the context. What is the context? So I ask a lot of questions about the context. Are you using Teams? Are you using what tools are you using? How people are working with those tools. So you try to having a discussion with the IT team. You try to understand the global context. You know, if they're using Teams, what components in Teams, and so assessing the environment, eventually some cultural elements of the context. Is it are you a large company? Are you an international company? Are you siloed, etc. And I think the next step is a very important one because so many people are assuming they know the problem and the root cause of the problem. In fact, most of the time they don't know. They don't really know, how people are working. They see some signals. Like for example, I don't, the problem is we are not productive, and we think that it's because people are not leveraging the technology. So we think that um, we're going to deploy new technology, or if we already have the technology, we're going to train the end user on the technology. So help us to train the end user on the end users on the technology. And so when I get in observation mode, I ask some questions to some people to understand the root causes of this lack of efficiency. So maybe they're using the technology, maybe they know how to use the technology. So a good example is when I do interviews, I always ask them questions around how many emails do you have per day? How many meetings? And often people are saying, we have over 100 emails per day. We have back-to-back meetings. And I said, so when do you work? Because your day is filled with meetings and you have emails, and so when do you have time to read your emails, and when do you have time to do the work, to do the job? And then you can understand the patterns here. You can understand that people are multitasking during meetings. People are working late after hours, so it creates fatigue, and so of course they're not efficient. But is it the tool? Here it's email, but you start to think about a solution, and the solution is probably, the tool, switching from Outlook to Teams. But also, it's not just the tool; it's uh, behavioral changes. Why do you have so many emails? Is it a bad thing to have emails? So you need to investigate, look, observe to see if is it really a bad thing to have a lot of meetings, or is it a bad thing to have to have too many emails? What is bad in? Is it the flow, or is it the information that is shared? So probably it's a good sign when you have a lot of conversations because it shows that people are talking to each other. and so it's better it's a good sign if they have meetings because they're discussing all together and they're aligning probably. So you need to take what is good in their behavior, but shift it to fix the problem. So here, you know, keep this flow of communication in between people, but make it more digestible. Maybe you can have the same discussion without being in a meeting. Maybe you can do that in a team. Maybe you can have the same discussion that you have in email. Maybe it should be in a team. Maybe the behavioral change is to say, let's meet just to make decisions and let's discuss in a team before and after, and let's zap some meetings that are just informating and look at the recording if we need to. So really building a solution is a matter of following those steps, under, understand well the problem, understand the context around the problem, observe. So look how people are working, what are their behaviors, what tool they're using, and then you can start to figure out what is a good solution without, uh, being authoritative in the way you want people to change. You need to understand what was good before, and to maybe redirect uh, what they were doing well, maybe in other ways of working. And so that's my framework: problem, context, observation, and solution. Because if you're switching from problem to solution, that's most of the organization I work with. They might, say, okay, we have a problem. So not our environment is not modern, so we're gonna deploy new technology. Or even after, okay, we deployed the technology, we deployed Teams during COVID. We didn't have time for training, so now it's time for training. But you need also to understand how teams. It's not just about the technology; it's about people, behaviors, governance. You need to understand, how people can leverage the technology for their job and to fix your problem. Because you can say that teams can trigger the same issues if you overwhelm people with so many teams, so many notifications. So you need to create some alignment, and that goes through this framework of problem, understanding the context, and observe how people behave, and several tools to do that: the interviews, focus group, surveys, and then start to define a solution. And I will say that you should repeat that, restart that often to see if the problem has been fixed, and then try to understand the context still. If the problem is still there, re-understand the context, re-observe, and adjust to fine-tune your solution. Hope this will be an helpful framework.